Okay, so you're here with us because you really want to get what's going on in politics these days, beyond just the headlines and little sound bites. And we really want to dig deep today into this whole thing, the Fighting Oligarchy tour with Bernie Sanders and AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And you've probably seen the fiery clips going around.
Yeah.
But we've gone through and we've read the reports from Fox News, NBC News, the New York Times to really get the complete picture and see what's really happening here. So our mission today is really to get to the core of what their message is, identify exactly who they're targeting, and understand what kind of ripples this tour is creating.
Right.
So let's unpack this whole thing.
I think what's really interesting and noticeable right off the bat with this tour is that the name is so intentional, Fighting Oligarchy. It's not just, some vague call for change.
Yeah.
It's a direct accusation. They're saying that the U.S. is increasingly controlled by this elite class of people who have way too much power.
Right.
And this framing is really important because it taps into this feeling that's been growing more and more.
Yeah.
This idea that the system isn't just unfair. It's like fundamentally skewed towards the very wealthy.
Totally. And they're not mincing words with that at all in Arizona. Sanders just straight up said, we will not allow you to move this country into an oligarchy. We're not going to allow you and your friend, Mr. Musk, and the other billionaires to wreak havoc on this country. Like, it is a pointed statement against these super rich people.
Right.
And Ocasio-Cortez was totally on the same page. She told the crowd, we're going to throw these bums out and fight for the nation we deserve. You can really feel that it's like a battle has been declared.
Absolutely. And it's not just talk. If you look at the data on wealth concentration these days,
right,
and just the huge amount of money going into lobbying, it's really hard to just ignore what they're saying.
Yeah.
Like, there's a real connection you can see between extreme wealth and the policies that get made.
Right.
And that's exactly what they're trying to point out.
Exactly. And a lot of their criticism is aimed directly at the Republican Party, especially Trump. The reports all say they're accusing Trump of undermining the Constitution and taking away freedoms.
Yeah. And, specifically, Sanders called out Trump's executive order on the Department of Education.
Oh, right.
He said it was an outrageous overreach of presidential authority. He called it a usurping of Congress's power.
Wow.
So his argument is that these kinds of big policy changes should be debated and voted on by elected officials, not just dictated by the president on his own.
It's interesting, though, because when you look at it from Fox News's perspective, they presented this executive order as, something necessary to make the education system more efficient, to get rid of bureaucracy.
Right.
So it's like you have these two completely opposite ways of seeing the same thing.
Yeah.
What does that tell us about where we are right now politically?
I think it shows how divided we are. One side sees it as strong leadership. The other sees it as like authoritarian overreach.
Yeah.
And Sanders is definitely painting this as a dangerous pattern.
Yeah.
Where the president's power is going around the checks and balances that are supposed to be there.
Right.
And that really connects with people's worries about power getting too concentrated in one place.
Yeah, definitely. And Elon Musk is another key target in their criticism of Republicans. He's the head of that new Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. I mean, that name alone,
that's,
coming from that internet meme.
Yeah, it sparked a lot of conversation.
Yeah, a lot of commentary about that. But anyway, so Musk is a big Trump donor, and he's become a major focus for them. And Sanders has said he's worried that Musk is essentially running the government and, making cuts to really important things like the VA.
Right.
And even suggesting that he might go after Social Security.
Yeah, and it's really smart how Sanders and AOC are connecting the dots between campaign donations, political appointments, and then the policy decisions that get made. They're saying that all the money Musk gave to Trump's campaigns basically bought him a position of power.
Yeah.
So now he can push through policies that benefit the rich
right,
at the expense of everyone.
Exactly. And it's not just about these specific people. Sanders also slammed the Republican tax bill, calling it this huge gift to the richest 1%, and saying it could be really bad for programs like Medicaid. His big message is that Americans are sick and tired of a government now run by billionaires. And you hear that idea over and over again in his speeches on the tour.
Yeah, and it really gets to the core of why people don't trust the government anymore.
Right.
Sanders is tapping into that frustration that the system is rigged, that it's designed to help the rich and powerful and leave regular people behind.
Absolutely. But here's where it gets really interesting and maybe even a little surprising. They're not just going after Republicans. Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez are also taking aim at their own party.
Yeah.
The Democrats, they keep saying they want to see a Democratic Party that fights harder.
Yeah, that's a key part of this tour. They're not just being against the right.
Right.
They're saying they're unhappy with how the Democrats are doing things. They think the establishment isn't being assertive enough.
Right.
And Sanders pointed to polls and voter registration numbers to show that people are losing faith in both parties.
Yeah.
He said it's because people think both Democrats and Republicans are controlled by big money interests.
Right. And Ocasio-Cortez said the same thing directly to the crowd in Arizona. She said, we need a Democratic Party that fights harder for us choosing and voting for Democrats and elected officials who know how to stand for the working class. It's a real challenge to the way things are in her party. She's calling for a more progressive and strong stance.
Yeah. And what happened with Chuck Schumer really highlights this tension within the party.
Yeah.
When he supported that funding bill written by Republicans, it made a lot of the progressive base really mad. And you could hear that with the primary Chuck chants at the rallies.
Wow.
So this isn't just about disagreeing on policy. It's about a fundamental difference in how they think they should oppose the other side.
Yeah.
And how strong that opposition should be.
Right. And AOC has criticized Schumer pretty openly about this before even calling his support for that bill a betrayal. And even though Sanders didn't say anything about the calls for Schumer to step down, he said it was inside the Beltway stuff, you could really see how disappointed people at those rallies were. I mean, it shows that they want a more confrontational approach to Trump and Musk's agenda.
Yeah, this whole thing that's going on within the Democratic Party is a really important takeaway from this tour. Sanders and AOC are giving a platform to the people in the party who feel like their leaders aren't doing enough.
Yeah.
To push back against what's happening. And it makes you wonder how the Democratic Party is going to change in the future.
Right.
And if there will be shifts in power and ideology.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. So to kind of change gears a little bit, there have been all these protests against Tesla and Elon Musk lately, including people vandalizing Tesla cars in Las Vegas.
Right.
And the Attorney General even called it possible domestic terrorism, which is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, that's a serious escalation.
Yeah, and Sanders was asked directly about this, and he condemned the violence, calling it outrageous, absurd, and saying that nobody has the right to engage in any form of violence, period. But he also defended people's right to protest peacefully against Musk's policies and actions.
Right.
So he's making a clear distinction. It's okay to disagree with Musk and protest against his companies and his influence.
Yeah.
But violence and destroying property are totally unacceptable. It's a nuanced position, I think. He's trying to balance the right to protest with the need to keep people safe and keep things orderly.
That's an important point. He's acknowledging how angry people are at Musk.
Yeah.
But he's also sticking to the idea of nonviolent political action.
Yeah, it's also really interesting to see how Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez have different styles on this tour. The New York Times article really highlighted this. Sanders' approach is often described as being like a sociology lesson.
Yeah.
He focuses on the big picture of inequality and doesn't really make himself the center of attention.
That's been his style for his full career. He's always focusing on the systems and structures that create these social and economic problems.
Right. But Ocasio-Cortez is much more personal. She talks about her own experiences, like when she was a waitress, to connect with people and make her points. And one really powerful example was when she responded to Trump's lawyer dismissing her intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
She turned it around and said he was dismissing all working class people.
Right.
Just her.
It's really effective how she can connect personal stories to these big political issues.
Yeah.
By talking about her own background, she makes things like inequality feel more real to people.
Right.
It helps them understand and feel empathy.
And there's definitely buzz about Ocasio-Cortez maybe taking on a bigger leadership role in the future. Even maybe following Sanders. People were selling AOC 2028 pins at the rallies, which shows how excited some people are about her. But Sanders doesn't seem to want to talk about it.
Yeah.
He just calls it inside the Beltway gossip.
It makes sense that he wants to keep the focus on what they're talking about on the tour.
Yeah.
But it's clear that some people in the progressive movement are ready for a new leader and maybe a new face for the movement.
And another big part of their strategy is appealing directly to working class voters. They've been going to battleground states like Nevada, where there are a lot of unions and working class people. And Sanders really went hard on corporate greed. The fossil fuel industry, drug companies, insurance companies, calling them major criminals who are robbing us.
It's really powerful populist language. It's meant to go beyond the usual Democrat versus Republican thing.
Right.
And connect with anyone who feels like they're struggling financially,
Yeah.
no matter who they usually vote for it. It speaks to the worries that working families have.
Right. And Ocasio-Cortez keeps saying we need to be united, telling people to fight for someone you don't know.
Right.
It's a powerful message about solidarity. It's saying that even though we're all different, we're all in this together, and we need to fight against these powerful forces.
That's the heart of progressive thinking.
Yeah.
The idea that we need to work together to make things fairer,
Right.
even for people we might not know personally.
Absolutely. So lastly, let's talk about what's going on in the Democratic Party as a whole.
Okay.
The reports show that the party's approval ratings are super low. And a lot of Democrats want their leaders to be much tougher in opposing Trump's agenda.
Right.
So there's this tension, between wanting to stick to their principles and also wanting to compromise with the other side.
That's the big challenge for Democrats right now. How do they effectively fight against a really strong Republican Party,
Right.
but also listen to their own base who feel like they're not being strong enough in their opposition? And this Fighting Oligarchy tour is like tapping into that frustration and suggesting a more aggressive and progressive approach.
Right. So to wrap up our deep dive today, it seems like Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez are presenting a united front against what they see as a real threat of oligarchy. They're criticizing what Republicans are doing under Trump and Musk, but they're also unhappy with how the Democratic establishment is handling things. This tour is really exposing the tensions and debates within the Democratic Party, and it's showing us the different but also complementary styles of these two really important progressive voices.
I think for you, the listener, understanding all of this gives you a way to see the bigger picture.
Right.
It shows you how people disagree about the problems facing the country and the different solutions they're proposing, even within the same party. Knowing all of this is really helpful for making sense of what's happening right now.
Absolutely. So when you think about all this criticism aimed at both parties, what does it tell us about where American politics is headed? Could things be realigned in a different way? And even more importantly for you, the listener, what role do you see for these grassroots movements?
Right.
And for everyday people getting involved to challenge the people in power and shaping the future? I think that's something to really think about.
Absolutely.
Even after this deep dive is over.
It's a question worth pondering.
Definitely. Okay, well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll catch you on the next one.
See you later.
Bye.